today we're going to talk about phonology. I decided that we should just zoom into what's interesting. And I will introduce you two reading passages. That's two tiny essays that can help you with your pronunciation. The chapter is from this textbook. It's called Introduction to Language. It's a really good textbook. Before we start phonology, here's a task for you. We have Travis from Kansas. Vimbai is from Zimbabwe. How would you name Travis? Cui. Now, Cui, tre and Cui, why can't you make tre? The problem is we don't have consonant clusters. We don't have TR words, so you can't. So you have to make sacrifices, you know. So and then now tre. The T in front of R sounds like t. That's why you're willing to make it tre. And then verse is another problem. First of all, we don't have the V sound. So did you say way? So what's the similarity between V and W, the V and W sound? They are labials. They use part of your lips, so you're willing to make it way, which sounds like V. And actually in China, some people say 新闻 instead of 新闻. That's the same reason, because they have they have similar pronunciation. And verse, okay, you did 推尾 si. He's a boy. I don't think he would be very happy with the si sounding. Now, shi, okay, shi. But you see, the last sound we're trying to make is the s sound. But it's just s. But when you're adding the either shi or si, you're actually adding one extra vowel, right? So you're not being completely faithful. But it's because in Mandarin we simply don't have a consonant by itself, okay? And we don't have consonants. People are thinking, oh, why can't you make this? We can't do that either because in coda position we only allow nasals, right? So that's because of it's like the law of Mandarin sounds are like that. You just have to deal with it. So it's the same thing for Vimbai. What's the problem for, how would you name Vimbai? I'm curious. Fan, okay. Fan and va is kind of, it's also a labial sound. Fan, bai, fan. So you're replacing this M to another nasal sound, right? Fan. Because we don't have bilabial nasals in Mandarin. Can you think of any word that has bilabial nasal at the end of any Mandarin words? 范百宜. Yeah, that will work. But the point is, because of our phonology, because of your first language, because of Mandarin, there are some laws that you just cannot violate. You don't have bilabial nasal at the end, so you just have to replace it with another nasal. So phonology is a study. There are two. Phonology has two different meanings. The one that we're dealing with right now, actually we're dealing with both. It's a representation of the sounds and sound pattern in a speaker's mental grammar. Remember in intro we talked about grammar can be treated in two ways. What are they? Do you guys remember? It's just the English grammar that you guys talk about. Remember, the past tense should be blah, blah, blah. That kind of a more specified definition of grammar. So let me rephrase it again. So when you think of grammar, the first one you can think of is what's stored in your brain, what makes this whole language work, everything. It's not just syntax, it's not just grammar, 不是只有文法. It includes your pronunciation, your phonology. Is somebody Skyping me? Phonology, syntax, and semantics. Everything you know about that language is stored in your mental grammar. Okay, so phonology is specific about that. one part of your mental grammar is dealing with the sounds. That's why, and you guys are Mandarin speakers, that's why you know we don't have TR initial sounds. We don't have S in the coda position. We don't have at the end of the syllable, because you are equipped with the mental grammar of Mandarin as a first language speaker. And in linguistics, when we're teaching you, we turn to define it as it's the study of sound patterns in a language. Okay, so these are the two ways you can think of phonology. But just to sum it up, we deal with sounds, and we want to know how that works. We want to study the laws. So we're now in sound law school for sounds. So we're going to use a lot of examples from English. We'll use examples from English. And today we're going to look at examples from First Nation people in Canada, the native people in Canada. And then we'll look at another case that's from Italian. And then later on, we're going to go on to Mandarin and Taiwanese. So this is what the reason why I use Travis and Vimbai to have you guys name them is because with a phonological knowledge of the language, if you have phonological language of a language, it means you can produce meaningful utterances in that language, and you can recognize accent. So you guys can immediately recognize a person, a Mandarin speaker, maybe from Singapore or China or Hong Kong. You probably can't pinpoint which accent that person has, but you are like, oh no, wow, that's a different way of saying things. And then you can make up words. I can like the Vimbai and Travis case, I can have you make up words, but whatever you make, it's gonna follow the law of Mandarin sounds. You're actually most likely making up similar words, following similar principles without awareing of it, awareing. So you apply phonological rules in the same context. Let me give you an example. Remember we did a Mandarin tone sandy practice in our intro class. So if you read 总 and 同 together, it becomes, what did you do to that third tone? It was a third tone, and every single one of you changed it to a second tone. So if I give you a word that I've never heard of before, let's say 盘顺. You've never heard of that word before, right? So that's why I make the test, because you have never heard of it before. There's no way you can practice ahead. So 盘顺. If you have to read it again, how would you read it? You change that 盘. It's not a real word in Mandarin, but you can change it to 盘. All of you do that. See, you apply the same phonological rule in the same context. You, as native speaker of Mandarin, you're governed by the same laws without knowing it. So, and you also know different phonetic strings may represent the same morphemes. That's referring to the case that we're going to discuss today, the plural morphemes let's say in English. Sometimes you add s sound, sometimes you add z sound, sometimes you add uz to words like buzzes. But do you guys treat these three plurals differently? Buses means there are a lot of buses, but if you only add s, it means only two. No, we don't do that. They're all plurals. So with the phonological analogy, you actually can know the different, although they sound different, in your mind, it's like you're doing a calibration. 就是它们听起来虽然不一样，可是你的脑子就会自动把它规整回来。They mean the same thing, although they sound differently. Okay? Now, this is just another practice example. So, can you think of any English word that start with the sound? No. I'm going to bet you $10 there's no such word. How about Mandarin? Yang. Yang. 娘是 velar nasal initial 吗？娘，娘，你的舌头 when you're saying the it's an alveolar nasal, not a velar nasal. But many of you have the problem of distinguishing your velar nasal and alveolar nasal. So, 花光光 can become 花关关，关关。And how about Taiwanese words? Any word that start with the velar nasal? Think about ang. Ang sai means husband. Ang, ang. Is it a velar nasal initialed? 是吗？是 velar nasal initial 吗？它其实是 ang, ang. It has a vowel in front of it. Ang, ang. So I'm looking for a word that has velar nasal as the onset. I'll give you something even better. In Taiwanese, there are words that just have the velar nasal. Yellow. It means yellow. But native speakers of English would know, oh, there's no initialed word, or Mandarin speaker would know there's no bilabial nasal coda word. So this is all part of your phonological knowledge. Now we're going to move on to variations. You guys should have a good sense that you don't always pronounce the same sound exactly the same in different contexts. So you should be able to tell me now, for this T, this baby T, how many different ways can you pronounce the T? T with aspirated T, right? And unaspirated T, unreleased. Yes, unreleased. Any variation you can think of. We have three now: aspirated, unaspirated, unreleased. Glottal stop. When do you have glottal stop, guys? Yeah, most of you wrote button or kitten. But I actually want you to describe. You should go a step further now. Can you describe when you will have glottal stops? As an allophone of T. It's before nasal, right? And it has to be before a syllabic nasal. But remember I have that dot underneath the nasal? So we have glottal stop. We have one more thing. Actually, there are more, but we'll stick to those 5 things now. There's one more variant. So you need to remember the word variation. We're looking for variations of these sounds. What's the last thing that we talked about in class? Allophones of T. B-U-T-T-E-R? Butter. And that's a flap. Yes. So we actually have these guys as variations of T. And do you notice, this is finally the point, I'm going to explain to you what's the difference between slashes and brackets. So for the slashes, they are things that's saved in your brain, in your database. That's why we use that's when we use slashes. And then these are the things that you actually pronounce. In phonology, we argue that in terms of economy and efficiency, you don't have to store all this in your brain, right? I mean, you can store one, this guy, this baby here. And then you just have to sort of remember in what, you don't, as a native speaker, you don't have to remember. You just grow up, and then once you're exposed to it well enough, you just do it naturally. You will have American speakers saying butter, butter. They will just not say butter because they're exposed to that phonological environment. So we argue that in your brain, you save something as a representative of this gang. 这个党的那个代表在你的脑子里头。And then you just from your environment, you naturally accumulate the instinct that these variations should be used instead of a typical T for native speakers. But you guys, including myself, we're not native speakers of the language. So you just have to learn phonology to be able to acquire the accent you want. So if you want British accent, you should study British English phonology. And then if you want American accent, you study American English phonology. So we're going to cover more phonological rules and mostly focus on American English because that's the accent that I'm mostly familiar with. And this is the first symbol we're going to, we talk about slashes and brackets, but this is the first symbol you need to learn today. This means in the environment of. So underlyingly, there's a UN, but a surface as 皮老板. Notice I use the bracket. In the environment of NCTU FLL. In this context, I'm your 皮老板. But when I'm at home, my mom called me 丫头, and I become a 丫头. It's an endearment form for younger daughter. And then every single one of us have different variations. When I'm in a pub, I won't tell you that. Okay, so variations and the underlying form. We'll do more practice. So just once again, so there's something we store in our brain, in our mind, which we call phonemes. So that baby T, which is the representative of the T gang, is the phoneme of the entire group. And all those variations are allophones of it. This you know already. So taking L, for example, we learned that you can save an L in your mind, but when you actually say it, when do you have the light L? In what context? Before a vowel, syllable onset, syllable initial. These are terms you need to start getting familiar with. Syllable initial means it's the initial segment of the syllable. You can call it the onset of the syllable. And then for dark L, it's usually syllable final, or the coda of the syllable. So there are allophones of L, depends on different, they occur in different environments. So phoneme is a combination of phone and im. Im means meaning. It's a mental representation of a sound. And this representative would actually change meaning of words. That's how we call them phonemes. This is just a quick review. And then for allophones, their pronunciation are predictable. That's the key thing. It's just not any random variation. These allophones, recognized allophones, they have to have predictable pronunciation, and you will be able to predict what environment they occur. And did I tell you the analogy of Superman and Clark when we talk about it in intro? Yeah, so for those who are not in intro, Superman and Clark are actually one person, right? They just show up in different variations, in different environment. When there are troubles, you get Superman, but in ordinary days, you get Clark. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, yeah. So which one do you think should be the representative of this two-person gang? So in terms of the efficiency, to be more efficient, you don't have to be geared up as a Superman, like, oh, yeah, you have to wash that outfit every day. Yeah, so usually we pick the most common, occur in many, many different environments, that one to be the representative, to be the phoneme of that group. OK， 我们挑那个最常出现的 ，OK， 在不同的 environment 最常出现的。OK， so the avian flu is going on. It's very popular to do a 快筛. They just have certain kind of testing to immediately know what type of virus this is. So we do phoneme 快筛法 by doing minimal pairs. If you can find minimal pairs of usually when in the data set, we'll give you like 20 or 30 different words of a language. You can find two sounds in minimal pairs, then it shows that there are different phonemes. So let me just rephrase it again. For minimal pairs, it means there are two words that with different meanings that are identical except for one sound that occur in the same place. So it's one sound difference in the same position. Then we call them minimal pairs. I have cab and cap. So the only difference is this word ends with a B. Oh, notice that when you do minimal pairs, do not just look at orthography. You need to use IPA. Okay? 不能只看那个 A B C D， 你要把它 transcribe 变成 IPA 之后再去比较它是不是 minimal pairs. Can you give me more minimal pairs? 文粉 Yeah. English is probably easier. Lake, sake, take. It doesn't have to be just syllable initial, make. It can be any segment. Lane. Are you saying L-A-N-E? Lane. It could be any segment, okay? So we're actually going to do problem sets. Okay, we'll start with the Eastern Native Canadian. Inuk we have heard of. Inuktitut. Without knowing the stress, I don't know how I should read it. So okay, the first is minimal 快筛. So your task is to find minimal pairs that only differ in one sound but has different meanings. Let's find one together. So for A, is there any minimal pairs? K, yes. And so you write A and K, the entire word in the table that I gave you. List all the minimal pairs in this data. So you list igloo moot and then do a hyphen to igloo meat. So this is actually what we do when we go to document less known language. We record many words and then try to do minimal pair through the data, usually thousands of words, and then you find minimal pair. If you can find minimal pairs for those two sounds, it means they are unique, they are phonemic, and they are contrastive. For us to prove that E and U are unique phonemes in this language, what minimal pairs can you give to show that they're unique phonemes? Which two can give us the A and K? Yeah, they only differ in meat and moot, right? At the end. Okay, that shows that E and U are unique. How about R and U? C and N. Yes, C and N. So we were talking about R and U. R and U. So C and N, they only differ in one sound in exactly the same position. How about E and R? B and H. Yes, B and H only differ in one vowel. F and I. Yes, only differ in one vowel. Okay, so these are actually the easy one. With the minimal 快筛, you know exactly whether they are phonemes or different phonemes, or they might be variations of each other. Now try this Italian case. I'm going to ask you alveolar and velar nasal. Okay, in this case, I'm interested in alveolar and velar nasal. So when you're doing phonology problem sets, it's very useful you have those highlighters. So you can highlight all the alveolar nasal, and you can highlight all the velar nasal. So all the alveolar nasals are on the left-hand side, all the velar nasals on the right-hand side. Can you find minimal pairs that only differ in N or and ingma, and then they mean different things? Try and see if you can find tingta. No, there's no tengda. Dangsa, no. Ngero. Hey, you guys should practice this. Can you do velar nasal at the beginning of this black? Ngero. Good. Oh, yes, you're becoming phoneticians. Ngero. Okay, so To answer the first question, examine, so there are no minimal pairs. The answer for A is no. So the next step would be, maybe there are variations of the same sound. So if they are allophones of the same phoneme, actually, we can first of all decide which one occur in what condition. When do you think you will have N, and when do you think you have Look at their neighbors. Usually it's the neighbor which contaminate them, 把它带坏了. Is it whenever it's followed by a stop, get velar nasal? Velar stop, right? You see, it only occurred before g and k, and they are velar stops. And ingma is a velar nasal, so it makes sense because your neighbor has the place of articulation in the velar position. If you have the same place of articulation, your tongue would not have to move. So that's one motivation for human speech evolution, is we get lazier. Ease of articulation. Remember this term, we'll talk about it again. So it's easier for you to articulate. So let's answer number C first. What are the environments which condition the occurrence of alveolar nasal and velar nasal ingma? So for velar, it's easier to, let me show you a trick. It's easier to describe the less frequent sound and then just say the other sound occurs elsewhere. So you can say we have ingma in the environment of, you can just write it out. This means this is where your sound is. This is where the ingma is. Whenever it's followed, whenever there is a velar stop after it, you get an ingma. And then you get this elsewhere. Number 2, if they are allophones of the same phoneme, which one is the underlying form? Would you pick the velar nasal as your representative in your mind, or the velar nasal? 你会挑还是做代表? Alveolar. Look at the environment for alveolar. The alveolar sound occurred before stop for number 1 and 2, and occurred before fricative in number 3, occurred before vowel in number 4, and then another stop in number 5 and vowel in number 6. So it can occur before consonants and vowel, in stops and fricative. It occurs in many environments. So we pick that as our underlying form. As the, I didn't tell you. So the underlying form is the one that you saved, the representative. So it has so many different names. It's the representative. It's the underlying form you save in your mind. These are actually very easy. Okay, but the focus today is we're going to discuss the plural morphemes, which we sort of touched upon before. We want to discuss the plural morphemes in English in more detail. So just a quick review. Morphemes are the smallest unit of linguistic meanings or functions. So phoneme means it's a sound and it has meaning. Morpheme means it's a string of sound. It can be one, but it's sound, but that sound has meaning. Let me ask you, for cat, the word cat, how many phonemes are there in cat? How many sounds? Sounds. K, at. 3 sounds. You should know by now. How many segments in cat? 3 segments. Okay, segment is kind of a synonym for sounds in the context of phonology. Okay, do you think k itself means something? No. A doesn't mean anything. T doesn't mean anything. It's the combination of k, a, t. It means that thing that we worship. Now here, sheep dogs. Can you tell me how many meaningful units are there in sheep dogs? 3. We have sheep, dog. Yes, sheep and dogs are just nouns, right? They are units. But s is kind of different. Can s occur by itself in English language? 你有看那个文章的时候看到一个死自己在那边 No, you can't. It's a suffix. It has to be attached to mostly nouns or verbs for different purposes. So in morphology, which is not the focus of this class, but we are working on some cases that's relevant to morphology, actually make it more fun. So you need to know. So morphemes, you learned this in intro, right? Okay. So allomorph. So right now you can actually do a little bit of morphological analysis. When I give you a word like allomorpheme, you can actually, we know EME means meaning, right? And the name for it is actually shortened as allomorph. So it's morpheme. So allo just means it's different. It's the same thing, but just show up in different variations, just like our allophones. So allophones means it's one sound, but pronounced differently. Allomorph means it's the same morpheme, but it just sounds differently. You know that. So we'll show you how it works. But first of all, we always have to show this word. One of the longest words. Can you do a morphological analysis and cut the meaningful unit? Anti? This. Establish is probably the root. And then Terry-ism. Establish, to set up. This establishment. Establishment. And then this, and then ism. So that's the beauty of morphology. It's fun to do. And remember last time we did a Catholic meeting. That person was doing a wrong morphological analysis, thinking it's Catholic. Yeah, so morphology is important. Okay, so allophones are predictable variation of sounds. Allomorph is predictable variation of morphemes. And morphophonemic rules. Now let's do morphological analysis to morphophonemic. So it deals with morphology and it deals with the phonal sounds. And we're trying to figure out, so these are rules that determine how you pronounce certain morphemes. It just has a jargon. It's called morphophonemic rules. So it means there's maybe one morpheme, but it has many different ways to pronounce it. Let me give you the example right after this. Okay. So in column, this is from your textbook. There are 4 columns here. Can you tell me the plural for, can you just say it out loud? What's the plural form for taxi? So for all these guys, what's the plural form for criterion? These are irregular ones. You just have to memorize them. So we're not going to discuss what these guys is about because you just have to remember them. But these guys are interesting. When I ask you to pronounce the plural form for bag, I actually heard some of you saying bags. Native speakers' pronunciation is not bags. It's bags. Like I said, it's natural for native speakers, but for non-native speakers, you just have to acquire it. Bars. You don't have to emphasize it, but it's the instead of s. And then for all these guys, bags, cats, caps. And for all this, do you guys remember in column C, words ending in what type of sound will have to be added the us sound to it? Sibilants. What are they? Sibilants. And their voiced counterparts. Yeah, ch, yes. Your z, 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 v, s, z, j, j. Yeah, you're doing the voiceless and the voiced one. So all those sibilants will have the is added. So today we're actually going to go discover why that is the case. So we want to find out first of all, you need to recognize as a phonologist. So that's why I think phonologists are really smart people, because first of all, I'm not a phonologist. They're smarter. First of all, you need to be able to tell the difference. Let's say I send you to a jungle and you're recording people. You need to be able to tell the difference between voiced z and voiced s. And it's just not f and z and s. It's all the sounds. You have to be able to tell. And then second of all, you need to be able to find the patterns. Like the Jason Wu example I gave you. You need to find out the patterns. And then find out the phonetic properties of the conditioning segment. So you need to find out why. How this happens. Is it because of a neighbor? Is it because it's in a syllable initial position? Is it because it's after a stressed vowel? You need to be able to see that pattern. That's why it's difficult. So our task right now is to search for the environment which conditions this variation. So we already know for column C, for those words end in sibilants, doesn't matter it's a voiced sibilant. Is it just voiced sibilants that we need to add is, or all the sibilants? All the sibilants. And then for A and B, when will you add the to a sound to pluralize it? Boys, it's a vowel. Boy, oi. So vowel is voiced, you add the to it. So the criteria is whenever the segment is voiced, okay. And then for this, whenever the final segment is a voiceless, you add s to it. So we actually have some minimal pairs here. You see cap and cap, and then you add the here, and this is my favorite. For those who are going to be English teachers, these are minimal pairs you can use to trick your student. Yeah, you make them produce the plural form for bag, back, and badge. Are they minimal pairs? Yes, because we treat j as one unit. 那个 Africa 是一个，所以 yeah, they're all a, and then the final consonant is different. That's cool. So the environment, can you describe the environment of these three? So these are the allomorph we're talking about. In English spelling, it's just S or ES. But when you actually pronounce it, the actual pronunciation is what we phonetician and phonologists pay attention to. And you actually either add the or s or us to the sound. So what's the environment for adding us after sibilants, right? And then for s, after voiceless segments. But you need to be specific. It's after voiceless non-sibilant segment. Because if you just say after voiceless segment, you're not being very concise. So making phonological rules sometimes makes me feel like you're making laws. Of course, the language already exists. It's not like we make a law and all of you have to speak in a certain way. That's the beauty of phonology. You go to a group of language speakers and then you record their utterances, and then you realize, wow, there are so many hidden rules in your sound system. And then for the, it's after voiced non-sibilant segments. This is after voiceless non-sibilant segment, and this is after all sibilants. I want to show you this experiment. It's very. Did we talk about walk test in intro? It's really famous. Let me tell you, you're thinking, oh, we're non-native speakers of English and we have to learn all this phonological rule and morpho-phonemic rules. We have to learn those. But it's the same thing for those babies from English-spoken countries, because when they're first born, they couldn't even talk, right? So it's not like they are born, because it's not that they're in the fetus of that speaking environment and they grow up naturally knowing the phonological rule. You have to have enough exposure of the language. So those kids actually don't know the morphophonemic rule for English plural until they're about 3 years old. And how do we know if they know the rule already? Can we just tell them, how do you pluralize ball? First of all, yeah, what's plural? And then and they have heard mom and dad saying, oh, we have 3 balls in the yard. If he has heard the word, then it's not fair, you know. Maybe this kid has heard of it, that kid hasn't heard it. So they create a work test. It's also a 快筛 to see if the kids actually acquire the rule or not. So the logic is really beautiful, which is you give the kids one word that he has never heard before, and then show 2 of them. You go, oh, this is a wug. I bet you nobody have ever heard of wug. Do you guys know what wug is? It can be anything. You just draw a random one-eye monster and then say, oh, that's a wug. Yeah, we love doing this. That actually looked like a chicken. You should make it look more bizarre, alien. So you go, oh, this is a wug. Now, baby Lydia, this is a wug. Now, there's another one. Baby Lydia has acquired the sibling, the morpheme after siblings. You have to make up one word that ends with the sibling. Let's make a word. How about bus? Bus. Can we make bus into blus? Is that a word? B-L-U-S. Blus. Probably not. You can look it up, but blus. Okay, baby Lydia, this is a blus. And Lydia goes, oh, you're crazy. And then, but now there are 2 of them, so we have 2 blusses. Oh, wow, Lydia. If she does blusses, it means that she actually knows the difference between s, z, and us, and she would actually append the right form to it. So that's the work test, and you can do the same thing to for all phonological rules that you know. Remember we talked about, okay, so in Mandarin you can do this. If a professor's last name is Lin, we call them in Chinese, Lin Lao Shi, right? What other tones do we have? If a professor's last name is Zhou, we call him Zhou Lao Shi. Now, we can do the same thing to work test a child. So I'll tell you a last name, and you tell me if he's a teacher, how you would call him. So I say Lin, you go Lin Lao Shi. I say Zhou, you go. Now, and then you make up a new word like Pan. It's not a Mandarin word. It's possible, but we just simply don't have that word. Pan. She say 盘老师 or 盘老师. You see, we don't grow up saying third tone sandy. Actually, kids do tricky things. They would actually, you see, in third tone sandy, you change the first third tone, right? But they sometimes change the second third tone. I heard kids saying 勉强. You do 勉强, right? That's probably not the best term. Have you heard of kids saying random? So we are familiar with the rule because we have enough input and exposure, but they do tricky things when their phonological knowledge is not solid. It's usually not until they are like 3 or 4 years old that they actually fully acquire the phonology rules. So you can do this you can work test many things. So this is what we were doing. We want to add plural to bus, plural to but, and plural to bug. And the basic presentation is we have the IPA. Among these 3, which one do you think should be the representative of this plural morpheme gang in your mind? Look at S. S only occur after voiceless non-sibilants, but Z occur after consonant, after vowel, after. So actually Z occur in more conditions. Oh, I love that. Oh, yes. So we pick Z, and there's a benefit to it here. So if we add Z to it, for this, it's just adding it to it, so you get bugs, right? For a voiceless sound, you add the, but apparently it has to go through some rule to devoice it. 因为它出来的时候 this is the voiceless s, right? So something's happening here, changing the z to a s, which we will have to do. And then for this, you have a sibilant, and you're adding another sibilant to it. So it's difficult to pronounce. So something happened here and add a schwa between these two. So it's easier to pronounce. Imagine if your underlying form is s. Imagine all this is changed to s. What's going to happen here? S has to be changed to z, right? It's kind of fair. If it's the, you devoice it to become s. If it's s, you voiced it to become z. So it's fair. And then for here, if the underlying form is s, you don't have to do anything. Good? But here, if this is the s, you have to go through two steps of things. You first of all have to change this s to a z, and then you have to add a schwa to it. So having the z as the underlying form seems to be easier. You don't have to do so many steps to derive the correct form. 就是我们在选这个 underlying form 的时候，通常是选 environment 最常发生的那个，在很多 environment 发生的那个东西。可是你有时候也要看它，你怎么样，你的 formula 怎么样最精简的可以导致这些结果。所以是有两个方面你要考虑的。Let's see what's happening here. So there are actually two rules. One is adding a schwa, and the other is devoicing. There are two things that's involved. According to our discussion, you devoice the z to become a s when it's followed by a voiceless segment, or adding a schwa to it. So for a bus, you're applying rule number 1, adding schwa, so to block the sibilant cluster. When I say sibilant cluster, you should have some idea about what I'm talking about. And then you just become buses. And then for buts, do you need to apply the first rule? No, because these are not two sibilants. You apply the rule when there are two sibilants clustering together. And you apply rule number 2. Rule number 2 apply when the final sound is voiceless. You devoice that z and then come up with the output, buts. And then for bugs, you don't need to apply rule number 1 to add schwa because these two are not, this is not a sibilant. And then you don't need to devoice this one because this is a voiced segment. Oh, this should be a g. This is wrong. This symbol is wrong. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, IPA is very specific. This is alphabet G, not the IPA G. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll change it. Okay, so this is kind of I have to be honest with you, this is kind of an old-fashioned way of doing phonology. We believe there are rules, and you kind of have to order them. Which one rule has to go before another to make it happen. So these are the two rules you need to derive the right form.